All right.
Then let me in, please.
Yep.
Okay, Bill. You all set? Okay, great. So it's February 22nd, 2024. This is the Board of Finance meeting, and we are called to order. There will not be any seating of alternatives this evening. And what we will start with is the approval of the minutes from February 8th and 15th, 2024.
Okay, I move that we accept the minutes of February 8th, with the following amendments. Page 2, under fire marshal. So the sentence starting, Fire Marshal Gantic stated that it should say will submit one when completed to business manager Donna Latinchik, and the rest is the same. Eileen, I can send all these to you electronically, because it's really gonna be hard for you to hear, I'm sure, on Zoom to pick up everything.
Yep.
If they, obviously I'll cut out the ones that don't pass. And then at the bottom of page 2, it's an app, I am responding, it's spelled one word, capital IAM, capital RESPONDING, all one word. And then, I wasn't clear on, so I'm not gonna, I guess I won't suggest a change, but when Chief Moore, on top of page 3, Chief Moore stated that the total administrative increase due to the insurance, is 3,000. I wasn't sure what kind of insurance. So I think he means building, but I'm not sure. In that next paragraph, about 3 lines down, warranty with a Y, not an EE, that's the person, the warranty is the holder of the warranty. And then, that's a big fat paragraph, so I almost don't need 2/3 of the way down. And on mine, it's kind of on the right side, it's the sentence that starts, he stated that this needs to be either in CIP or their budget, but they aren't sure which one, as both CIP and BOF have told them. I think it should say over the years, because it's not this year that they were told that it should be in the other's budget. An extraneous word to, at the bottom of the page, Steph Summers commented that it should just be the one that. And after that, sentence right after that, Chief Moore stated, past tense. And the page 4, about halfway down, the copy block that starts with Chairman Lawler. And then it says, like 5 lines down, Steph Summers explained how the town of Willington is in negotiations with the town of Union since 2021 to get reimbursed for going there and add this without sharing costs for 13 years under the PSA agreement. And then the next sentence, she stated the town received a payment of almost 13,000, because I think it was more like 12,500. And then also in that graph, 4th line from the bottom, it says, it's talking about the room for there's still room for negotiations, as it would take them 12 years to be even with what the BOF make it thought was a fair amount in 2021, because that's when we said that we're not saying that's still a fair amount. And I would cut the last clause. Other agencies, it should say PSA, mutual aid, and other agencies within the town, period. Because it says that Fund 17 is the only one that gives back to the town, and I just think that's misleading, because Human Services, Parks and Rec, and the library all have revenue lines that are offset lines, which is really the same thing, the same animal. Page 5. that first copy block starting Chief Snyder. That is, I wanted to know about the insurance on that too, but for them, it's cars, building and apparatus, it's everything. When he says, he stated that there is an increase in the, building apparatus and private vehicle insurance, which is just on their lot. And down there, third graph from the bottom, talks about 2,810 will be a wash in the coming year because take out that is the key fob expense is all it needs. And then on page 7, the right before correspondence, graph starting Steph Summers says, Steph gave some history on WFD1's, it says past, I think, but it says past filings singular. I think it should say missed filings plural with the IRS. And then, then we have under present to speak under Tyler Millick's. It says, he stated 3 lines down, he stated that it was executed around the year 2000. It should say around the year 2011. It was quite a bit later than that.
Yeah, if he said that, then that's what he said. You can't just rewrite the minutes to what you want.
Yeah, you can if it's agreed upon. I mean, we all got a copy of it and it's dated January 2011. I mean, I don't know. I'm okay if you want to leave that out and say it was 2000.
So you want to correct and make him sound better than, what are you trying to do here then? You got grammatical errors, you got- okay, but if you go back, so then go back to the tape, and I mean, this is pretty word for word. And it doesn't have to be completely. So,
Okay. It's just, I think it's, when you're in the minute, you understand the context of minutes, and when you read it
okay,
as
if
a
he said
document,
2000,
which no one
he
covers
said 2000.
anything. Okay, leave it 2000 if you want
Well,
to.
that's what he said. That's what the minutes are supposed to be.
All right.
Otherwise, we're just wasting
I
time.
think here's the thing. I know you're frustrated with, anything like this, Jeff. I do get it, because I've known you a long time. But here's the thing. No one's covering what this town's business is now. No one. So if these minutes serve as the historic document. So I think they should be pretty accurate. That's all. That's all on that one.
Going on to February 15th now.
I think that has to be a second and a vote on this one. I'll second.
So we're voting as adopting the minutes with the changes that have been suggested.
Yeah.
Okay. Roll call vote, Eileen.
We're all here, we can just do it.
Okay,
Unless there's a dissent, then
Yeah,
you can
okay.
do roll call.
all right, all those, for it say aye.
Aye.
Aye, noes, nay. Extensions. Okay. Unanimously adopted. And now we'll move on to the 15th of February.
I move to adopt the minutes of February 15th with the following amendments. It's only a couple. First of all, it was a regular meeting. It wasn't a budget meeting. But, I think the agenda did call it a budget meeting, but as far as the way it's filed in the town clerk's office and everything, it should be notice that it's a regular BOF meeting. Page 2, under E0135 Board of Assessment Appeals, it says, Donna talked to that she worked with Karen Cote, and it should be Kara Fishman, the assessor. Right, Donna? Okay. And then on page 8, just add, and the commission held a meeting, it's, under H in its second paragraph, the commission held a meeting in January, and the commission will be kicking off the strategic plan process. Because there's no plan yet to kick off. And then that next paragraph, if we could say, because we did talk about this, that it was regarding the about 300,000 ARPA grant to energize local businesses. And on page 9, last line before correspondence. And this is with your agreement, Donna. I think it says that you noted that we were talking about the budget increases, 5-year look back. She noted that it has been updated with the ambulance payroll without offsets. And I think we should add except for 3,000 in cell tower revenue, because that's always added in. Isn't that an offset?
Town offsets, that's an offset from their private funds. And
Okay.
I was talking town offset to get to their town grants.
Okay,
So that's,
don't make that change then.
okay.
Let's just leave it.
I second that. All right, all those in favor of adopting the minutes with the changes that have been recommended, please say aye.
I'm gonna abstain, I wasn't here.
Okay. So 5 yeses and 1 abstention. Yeah, next we go on to present to speak. Public participation is desired and encouraged. Speakers will be limited to time and appropriateness of comments to maintain progress. Stay on topic and maintain decorum. Do we have anybody here for present to speak this evening? No? Yes?
Good evening, Peter Wiltinchich, 97 Trask Road. I wanted to address the Board of Finance on 2 issues tonight. One was the CIP process, which I've been trying to keep up with, and I really appreciate their efforts. I especially appreciated them last night because it was a marathon meeting, and I was hopeful that I understand the entire CIP budget a little bit in preparation for coming to this meeting. Well, once again, it just descended into total chaos with both fire departments and what they're trying to accomplish. I went to the CIP meeting 2 meetings before the last one when they made their presentations. I didn't think it could be even more confusing than was that meeting, but it was. And I really applaud the CIP folks for trying to understand it, but it also meant we didn't even get to the rest of the CIP schedule or just barely touched on it. What was encouraging to me from all of that was 2 things. One, that Mike McCoo, when he's on with us, was kind enough to share with us what he said no one will say in public, which is that both departments seem concerned about moving forward, and if services are rationalized in some way, which given the scale of the requests they're making of CIP to have to happen, neither one of them wants to lose anything, but they can't say that. I think that's adding to the confusion, so that was very helpful for Mike. The second thing that was encouraging to me was, and this is what I'd ask you to pursue as the Board of Finance when you're working with CIP, is the first selectman creating this essentially fire building committee, I think. And that would be primarily a committee composed of townspeople, not the fire departments. And a number of people spoke on that last night at the meeting. I think that's essential. And given the scale of these projects and the cost of these projects and their short and long-term impact, I hope the Board of Finance supports that initiative and essentially freezes any action on these fire department requests until that committee is established, funded, and figures this all out. Secondly, tonight, I look forward to tonight's presentation from the Board of Ed. A number of people at the Board of Finance meetings previously commented that this is a year where operational budgets need to be held steady or within the realm of inflation, so I'm hoping that's the case tonight, but thank you all for your hard work.
Thank you. And do we have anybody else for present to speak? Jim Marshall. Jim Marshall?
Good evening, everybody. Jim Marshall, 46 Fisher Hill Road. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I just want to start out by saying that I want to share my appreciation for the Board of Ed and our superintendent for their work on crafting this year's budget on the Board of Ed. I've been paying attention through their budget discussions over the past month or so, and truly it was very measured and thoughtful discussion all along the way, and it's some of the best conversation I've seen recently. And I hope that the Board of Finance here can support their budget because I think it really is as tight as it can be in what is a very rough year for them. The other thing I want to know specific to the Board of Ed budget is I do especially want to acknowledge that their acknowledgement that a facilities manager is a critical addition to help the board move along and to manage the very severe CIP needs that are forthcoming at all the schools, at both the schools. I really hope the Board of Finance supports this, discusses it at length and supports this request as well. And I honestly hope it's a need that shows up in the Board of Selectmen's budget next week as well. I have no idea whether or not it's being considered because the Board of Selectmen really hasn't discussed their budget much at all publicly beyond a single 45-minute meeting. But I do hope it comes on the table for discussion next week. And I hope you can have a lively debate there. And just to kind of second some of Peter's comments, I urge this board, I know Christina's been trying to raise attention to get both this board and the Board of Selectmen to pay attention to the very involved CIP discussions to get a full understanding of the real depth of need and what we're looking at over the next 5, 10, 15 years here. And as Peter mentioned, there was some really deep discussion surrounding how best to address the fire station projects last night. I'd ask you to, Christina and Steph, I think, can fill you in more detail if you want to take anything up. But it would be very beneficial, as Peter mentioned, to get this board's insight and opinion on and support of this fire department building committee being a public oversight committee. It can't be another, as originally proposed, a strictly fire department with a couple of town people managing how this town publicly funds very significant fire department building requests. It needs oversight. It hasn't had any to date. And a lot of the work for moving these projects along and how we address this as a town, the only way it's going to be viable or we're going to have a defendable path forward on the fire departments is to have that public oversight and the method for it. And with that, we also suggested funding, providing funding in year 1 last night for that fire department building committee under those expectations. But there should be some discussion here, and it will be helpful in advance of next week. If you all considered what that means for the open request, the 110,000 that hasn't been allocated yet in this year's budget for the Hill, and even unspent funds at the Willington Hill Fire Department, because those may, I know we had some discussion last night, but it would be good to see what this board's take on it and whether or not those funds should really be spent as they're not publicly managed. So thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate all your hard work thus far and in the budget discussions to come. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else for present to speak? All right, if not, we're going to go on to new business, which is the Board of Education presentation by Superintendent Phil Stevens.
Good evening. So I have Chair Ross with me here tonight as well. Just for the folks online, there was an accident down the road. So if we lose power, I believe the intention is we would lose power in this building as they restring. If the Zoom goes down, the point will be to reschedule that. I just want to make sure they know that. Are we gonna hold it in the dark? I just want to make sure you understand that because there's a chance that we may lose power. So, you know,
That's good.
just for the folks that are online that will have no idea where we went.
You seem to have a spate of utility poles being hit, like.
Right?
Yeah.
Can you do me a favor, next to the caret, next to share screen? Can you click that little caret for me, please?
Yeah.
Right there, yep, and then advanced sharing options. And then all participants, right there, yeah, perfect.
Okay, there's not save or anything.
Beautiful. Okay, so thank you very much for listening to us tonight. This has been a long process for us. We start our budget process really on our side in October with, you know, teachers, administrators. It's a lot of work, a lot of going through just to get to the document that you have in front of you today. The board spends about 6 weeks with the document, going through each program. We've had public workshops, we had 4 workshops this year, and really diving into each program. I'm gonna fly through the budget tonight, and highlight some of the things that are gonna shine for you and things that are gonna be really bright, meaning it could be really expensive or there's savings there. I'm not gonna go through every detail, but I'm glad to answer questions on all those things. You can see the table of contents. The first thing I'll speak to is the district framework that's here. So a big part of budgeting is making sure that we have our goals and beliefs and that all of our budgetary decisions are tied to this right here. So when we make decisions about what we're gonna put in the budget, it can be directly tied to one of these things. So there's nothing in this budget that, you know, is not directly tied to either a student growth and success goal, a culture and climate goal, or a sustainable and strategic investment in our schools. So it's just important to know that. The snapshot here, I will make this bigger for you on screen. Is that better for you?
Yeah.
So the Board of Ed budget, approved budget, for the current year is $9,151,473. We are currently in a budget freeze and have been for months. And I share that as a kickoff because it's important to know there's gonna be some big drivers in this budget, which is why you see the significantly larger number that's being requested. And I'll highlight the reasons why as we go through the budget tonight. So the Board of Ed approved budget from Tuesday night is $9,770,084. There's over $600,000 increase, and it's a 6.76% increase. That is by far the biggest budget I've ever presented. This is a needs-based budget. So if we can save $1 someplace, we do, and I'll show that as we go through. And the other piece that I'll share with you is that looking at all of the, Don and I get the CASBO reports, which is the business manager reports for all the budgets in the state for districts. The average right now is over 5. There are districts that are 8, 9, 10, 11% increases right now. And we are in that same high percentage. So we have developmental costs, budget assumptions and costs. And the start of this really is to let you know, like there's a lot of things that we can't control. It's about 97% of the budget that is contracts and things that are legal that you can't control. So when we lock in a contract for heating fuel or diesel fuel or electric, that is set, we budget for what we use. Don and I, over the last couple of years, have refined this so that we look at our use over a couple of years and we take that average. Some years we're a little bit high and some years we're a little bit low, but that's the rate that we go off of. The top piece, the medical insurance, we're living in something that we've never lived in. We have a 5% decrease in our premium this year. That never happens. We were actually at a 0 right from the get-go. And we said our usage for health insurance is really, really good right now, meaning there's not a lot of high use claims. And so the insurance company is making money on us, all right? And so when we said we are doing very well, our usage is positive, you should give us some relief, and they actually did. So it tells you how much money they were making on us. So we had a 5% cut in our premiums this year. It's about a $50,000 savings based upon our current group of employees that are taking insurance. That has never happened. And it happened on the town side and the Board of Ed side because we asked. Those are things that we press on all the time. Those things happen all the time. So we take every dollar and stretch it as far as we can. The biggest challenge in this budget is really around one program, that's special education. I spoke to why we have a budget freeze right now in our current budget. It's going on our 3rd month right now, maybe 4th month. Some districts budget funds, the funds, the emergency funds for outplacement tuition for special education. Typical outplacement tuition costs $150,000 per student. That means we've done everything in our power to keep that student in district. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to do that. And so sometimes students go out to outplacement facilities. They're very expensive, both facility and transportation. We budgeted for 2 in our current fiscal year. We currently have 4. We have not come back to the Board of Finance and said, help. What I'm telling you is we're budgeting for 4 next year. And there's a reason we're on a freeze right now, because we are trying to cover that without having to come back to you. But next year, there's over a $300,000 increase in the budget in special education alone. That's significant. I've never experienced that number in special ed before. And that's a big driver. Obviously, there's contractual increases, whether it's transportation, teacher contracts, administrator contracts, whatever, all of the contracts we have, pest control, all of those things go up 2, 3, 4, 5%. And those are built into the budget as well. I'll highlight really quick the shared services. We have a bunch. Novus is probably our biggest one, our IT company. They're the firm that when we get hacked from China or Russia, which we have been hacked, we haven't had to pay a ransom. I'm gonna knock on wood when I say that, because there are districts that have had to pay millions of dollars in ransom. Novus is worth every dime. They're expensive, but it's a shared service that we do with the town. It's what all of our IT is driven by. You can see the other things that we share. We negotiate some things together, like the heating oil and things like that. And then I'll just speak to some of the unfunded mandates. There are loads of them. One I was looking at today was around teacher certification. And there's a requirement that we have to provide 18 hours a year of professional development. That means there's no students that can be in school those days. That's a requirement by the state that we have to do, which means you have to pay staff, right? So there are tons and tons of those. And to be quite frank, the legislature just keeps pushing out more and more mandates, and the dollars that don't follow. So there's loads of those things that exist. There's some examples there for you. When we go through the budget process, a big portion for you to understand is we write every single grant that we can get our hands on to apply to the budget. In this budget, we've offset this budget by $485,000 in grants. That's a lot of money. Some of those are entitlement grants, which mean we just need to write them. Some of them are grants that we have to apply for and make sure, we can use towards certain things. But every grant we can get a hold of, we do. The COVID grants are drying up, and you're not gonna see the COVID grants in here. A lot of districts wrote their grants to try and keep things going. We did not do that. That's why you see 10, 11% increases in some districts, because now their COVID grant is dry and they're trying to keep things going. We did one-time purchases, and the board did 2 things this year. They just took out over $13,000 in this budget for things that I still have in the ARP ESSER grant as an offset. So we removed it straight out of the budget so we could purchase it out of the COVID grant. Those funds really dry up September 30th this year. So you won't see them in here, but you'll see some positions that we did not continue on where other districts are trying to. The enrollment that you can see there, really, if you look at the blue, the Prouda is the person that does the enrollment studies. He's projecting 413 students for next year. We're projecting 384. The reason why we're projecting lower is we actually have a very large 8th grade class this year going out to high school. We don't know our numbers right now for kindergarten coming in. We don't know if it's gonna be 36, if it's gonna be 45. That's always hard to predict, and that's, same thing there. So it's a little, we've been studying around the 400, And you can see that in this is the 20-year history. You can see that we've been steady around that 400 now for 4 years. And really within that, there was consistent years prior to that as well. Tell me if you want me to slow down, because I'm gonna talk fast. Program, we have 10 programs, and the 10 programs are broken up. This was created probably 5 or 6 years ago. And it's meant to show how much it costs to run the program. So to run center school, you have a cost here. You have in the start of each of these programs, if there's positions tied to this, they're listed there. If there's someone that's offset by a grant, it will say teacher Title I, that's a grant. So it's not that we have someone that's 0.33, they're a whole person or a half-time person, it's just add them up. One of the changes here that the Board of Ed really pushed for this year in this budget was to add a staff support specialist. We had one at center school last year, they asked to add a second one. And the reason for that right now, as you all know, if you look someplace, everyone has job openings. People can't fill those $15 to $18 to $20 an hour jobs, they're everywhere. That's impacting our sub pool. We're right now taking people, if they will work Mondays only, we'll take them. Mondays only, where it used to be, I can work any day you want. They added a staff support specialist person in there because we will guarantee them every day, and those are the people that cover our classrooms. Right now, I'll call it hodgepodge, and we'll say, hey, can you cover for this 45 minutes? Can you cover for this hour? And it takes away from planning time from teachers, and if I take too much planning time, I have to pay them. This is a great reason to add that person back in for some consistency. And the second person they added into this would be more considered to be a district person. So they would float between hall and center schools as needed. So you can see the salaries that are in there. They're contractual, the teacher, secretarial, staff support specialists, they're all contractual. If you look at the teacher line, you can see that line went down some. And what I want you to know is we hire the most qualified person that we can get in our applicant pool. But sometimes the person we're hiring only has 4 years of experience. And so if we're going off of someone that was making $90,000 and we hire someone that's making 60, that there's savings there. This is off of our current census right now for our teaching staff, knowing where we are. So we do this all the time. We work within our budget to hire the best person, but work within whatever dollars we're given. The purchase services there's a lot of things that, you know, to run a school, you need those things. You need your internet, you need your phone, you need your postage. Those are all contractual things as well. So, you know, when you look at cutting dollars, you can't cut your power school contract. That's your student operating system that stores all of your data. There's things like that throughout the entire budget. The subscriptions are minor for a district. The extra activities, the clubs, there's like one club in there. The educational supplies went up. The cost of items has gone up significantly. What I'll tell you is this averages to about $270 per student for the entire year. So if you think about it, we're talking about $1.50 a day, $1.75 a day for students for every single educational supply, art, paper, staples, everything. When I talk about a budget freeze that we're currently in, and this is a real life example I gave the other night, I stopped these purchases right now. Someone put in a purchase order the other day for staples for a copier. I denied it and said, you have to either take them from another copier if you can, or hand staplers, like we just don't have those funds right now. But this is what's in the budget right now, and obviously if we open it back up, then we would spend the money on those types of things, but that's what this amount covers, all of those materials.
I just want to clarify, you're talking about actual staples, not the store staples to buy.
Staples, actual
Yeah,
staples,
okay.
like staple a document together. I denied that purchase. That's where we're at today, and that's why I say the increase you're looking at is what we're living with right now within our dollars, and our budget has been frozen for months. So I'm denying all of those items as they come in right now. And my staff probably isn't so happy with me, but they understand why. The textbooks are really books. So you've got some periodicals like the Time for Kids magazines, things like that. You've got very little equipment in here. It's IT, things like Chromebooks, iPads. It's replacement parts. You've got some, the building maintenance is lumped into one set here. And this is all of your contracts for fire alarm inspections, pest control, our MCOR preventative maintenance contract, fire extinguisher inspections. A lot of things that you are required to do when we maintain our buildings. The one thing that the board did add in their last meeting, and they realized we typically rely on what's called our non-lapsing fund. That is a Board of Education account that can only grow to about $260,000. It's outside of our budget. It's what you put money into each year. You did that this year, and thank goodness you did, because that fund is being drained to pay for the special education outplacements that we currently have today, that were unbudgeted. So that account will probably not have any money in it at the start of next year, which typically we would. Why am I telling you that? Because they put $10,000 into this building maintenance line for things when they break that we can actually fix them. When we get a boiler that goes down and it's $3,000, there's no money in this budget for that type of thing. There is now. They put $10,000 into each program to pay for that, because we will not have the non-lapsing fund next year to pay for those things. The others are contractual. Conference and travel is part of a contract. The principal supplies is minor things that come up. Whenever you see like the 24,000 in that first year, it means we had money at the end of the year and we did something special out of that. And you can always look at our end of year reports where our notes pages, and it says exactly what we purchased. So you can see in this, and this is something new, I've not done this before. This first year I did it. I put the percentage increase on a program this year. And so this program has a 3% increase. There's a detailed overview for Hall School, Center School, and special ed write-ups in the back of this document. But a 3% increase below inflation right now, and it's tight. Program 2, a lot of same stuff. So you're gonna see the same costs, you know, when you start looking at staffing, you've got all the staffing that's in there, the salaries. You can see the salaries in this one are higher. We actually added more grant funding to this, and it's just based upon hiring. You can look through and you look at the staff support specialist that's in there. That number went up because I hired a certified teacher that will be in that position next year. They're retiring, so you have to pay them a little bit more. The purchase service, same types of programs that are in Center School. There's a couple that are different, like we have a belay system that's mechanical on our climbing walls. Those are inspected each year. But all of the things that are in there, disposal, that's your trash service, like those are, you can't cut those things. So when we talk about that 97% of contractual things, all of those things fall into that. That's not where you get any money back. Supplies, again, it's up higher than it was last year. There's some one-time purchases that are in those items. But again, it's the increase in the cost of paper and all of those things that are in there. We look at our actual usage, and that's why that's higher. You've got a dollar on there for library books. Again, the computer equipment, the building maintenance, same thing, all the same contracts. And you've got the $10,000 that's in there. They have sports and extra activities at Hall School, so you've got all the stipends, which are contractual. You've got the rates for officials. This is what I looked at over the last couple of years to see how many games we were actually playing on average and what we were paying officials. I dropped it down because we weren't paying as much. So again, where I can look for every single dollar and it's only a couple $1,000s in savings, we do that. The clubs right now, our clubs at Hall School are, when I say they're rocking, they are rocking. Like we have a huge percentage of our kids being clubs right now. And so we're offering more clubs than we've ever offered with transportation. Some of this is offset by a grant. You can see that we raised it up because we pay a contractual rate for the clubs. And it's once a week that we run clubs and they're very, very well attended. Small budget for sports equipment, sports memberships. We took out the after-school program snacks because it was, something that we had an offset through non-lapsing fund, I believe it was. So that's out. Again, conference travel contractual, principal supplies is minor, dues, fees and memberships are minor things for our professionals, a principal association, things like that. The thing I didn't talk about on the center school page that I will talk about on the hall school page is the grant offsets are listed on here for you, so you can see how we're offsetting this. So the total expenditures for $2,184,000 that you have there, it's offset. Title I is a grant we write every year. We're applying $37,000 towards a position next year to bring the budget down. Title IV, clubs, bringing it down. REAP grant, $6,800, that's the computer supplies, bringing it down. I'm highlighting that for you because I want you to talk, people always talk about transparency. I can tell you flat out, a lot of superintendents will never put this money in front of people, and I always have. Meaning, you would know those grants are there and the funds are there, and that's how some districts run. I don't believe in that, and I never have. So I will tell you that every single grant dollar that we have is an offset in your budget. The only grant that we have, I think that is not, is REAP. We get about 30,000 in REAP, and we have offset about 12. That is my buffer. So in a year where we don't have funds, like this year, I'm buying some supplies with grant funds, so I have some sort of buffer. REAP supplies or REAP grant will allow me to do those things. It is the only grant that we don't have entirely offset in budget. This program is a 4.62% increase. Again, nothing new, same exact program as what we're running this year. Yeah.
Two administrators to one?
Good question, thank you, Jim. So we, when we wrote our ARP ESSER grants, one thing that we were struggling in this district was writing curriculum. We hired a curriculum director for a 3-year contract. I would love to keep that person on. To keep that person on with benefits is over $150,000. We already have, several administrators in district because we have 2 buildings. And it was something that was a hard decision for me, to not put in front of the board. It's a lot of money. And so what we did is the grant is drying up, and I hired that person on a 3-year contract and was very transparent about that. That person will not continue on after this year. So this person was in this budget, and that's why when you see the full offset at the bottom, Jeff, see the grant offset ARP ESSER 121,920.
Right.
That line right there, that was a full offset of their salary with that grant. Good catch.
So that's a grant writing position?
It was a curriculum writing position.
Okay.
We funded it fully through the grant. And that was something that I really advocated for because we needed some curriculum writing done terribly bad in this district. And we did. We've got a lot done. We still have a lot more to go. But we got a good solid base done. And our staff is in a good position now to continue it as well, which is why I also felt like I couldn't justify $150,000 for someone. Special ed. This is a big program. And this is one that's legal. Just a crash course in special ed, basically what happens is when a student is not meeting a current level of, academics for us, or it could be behavioral in nature, and there's testing done and they are qualified for special education services, you legally have to provide those services. So everything in here that we provide, we legally have to do. So if you came back and said, look, I want you to cut a certain amount of money, this is not a program I can touch. So even though I've got a huge increase in this program, if there's a cut, it's gonna be very hard to come out of any program, but it absolutely couldn't come out of this one because it's legal. So when we talk about unfunded mandates, we have an administrator that just does special education. She's the director of special education because we are required to have an administrator at every single PPT. We're about 80 students that are identified in the district. They have to have an administrator at every PPT. That's a requirement. So if you were to put a principal in that role, that's all they would do all day long. And they couldn't do anything else. So you have an administrator in this role. The other items that are in here, we get significant funds and grants for special education. We use as much as we can as offsets in here. So when you see like 1.25 of a secretary, there's one secretary that's tied directly to the special ed director, and then a piece of a secretary at center and a piece of a secretary at fall, both have special education duties, and that's why they're tied to this budget. Same thing happens in transportation. So portion and building maintenance as well. So it's not like we have a quarter of a person. It's just a part of their job. It's how we manage it. Again, salaries, all contractual that you have there. We have, our special ed director has had some significant impact in the last 5 years of the number of paraprofessionals that we have decreased, number one. And number two, I talk about added value and making sure that we're looking at everything. When she came on, we did an audit and we looked at the number of paraprofessionals that we were contracting out with through EastCon. And what we found was it was more expensive to go through EastCon. There was a little bit of risk in case every person took family benefits if we put them in our own union. But it was worth the risk, and we've saved tons and tons of money now because we've got them in our union, and there's only one person now that's contracted out through paraprofessional. So that's a huge difference.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, you stated like earlier in the presentation that it's a pretty rare event to have the 4 special ed out of district placements.
It is.
Is this a fact that there's 4 and that's going to continue into this year? You're just hedging your bets and
No,
put it in?
we are budgeting exactly as of today, based upon those meetings. We have 4 students we know that we will be responsible for next year that we will own their cost. So sometimes a student will exit out into high school, or sometimes a student will move. Other districts will say, hey, I'm budgeting for 5, but I only have 4. We don't do that.
Okay, that was.
We have 4 placements that we know today. And the scary thing for us and Board of Ed, and really honestly for you, is this could change tomorrow. We could have 2 students move in that happen to be in a residential placement, and you're talking about $250,000 per student. That's what a residential placement costs, and we would have to be responsible for the cost. Special education outplacement tuition costs are super, super expensive. And if you want to get involved in legislation, this is an area where I'd advocate 100% for, because it is hurting small districts drastically. So you can see the cost and the tuition difference there, and you can see the difference in the transportation. It's a cost that we have to bear. And you see that there's an increase in the behavioral consultant. That is to help keep students in. So the increase from 35,000 to 46,000. One of the things, typically, if there's behavior involved before a student is outplaced, and they're part of our student body in town here, they'll have what's called BCBA hours, and it's behavior support. And sometimes that will help keep a student in. If you were to fight a case and you did not have BCBA hours, you would lose every single time. It is one thing when you go to a court, they ask you, what did you do for BCBA hours? We have to have those funds in there for that. So when I say contractual, legal, everything in here is that same one. They have minor supplies. A lot of these things are specific for special education, obviously. The things on the others are the contractual things that are part of a contract. The top year maintenance in all 3 buildings in special ed are going up. We are at the end of our lease and we expect an increase. So we have budgeted that in there. This is the important line for special ed. This is 2.6 million before grants, and it comes down to 2.2 million. Without these grants, you can see the cost of special education in here. We have an excess cost grant that we expect we'll get $279,000 back. That's an important grant for you to understand. Here's why. The state gives each district, each town, a certain amount of money based upon their ability to pay. We're in the lowest, meaning we get the highest percentage. We're supposed to get over 90% this year. But when the state doesn't budget enough money, we don't get 90%. Federally, we're supposed to get 100. I don't know how they get away with it, but we don't get it. We're supposed to get 90 right now. We believe we're gonna get 72 this year. So we're budgeting, well, based upon the special ed costs, and what happens is to figure out that number is it's 4.5 times your per pupil expenditure. So if you say it's about $90,000, which is, 4.5 of the times 20,000. Everything over $90,000 or up to $90,000, we're responsible for. Every dollar over that, we get 70% back. So when a student costs $150,000, $60,000 of that is eligible for that excess cost reimbursement, and we would get 70% of that cost back. So that's how we calculate that. Okay, and the majority of those students are outplaced. Very rarely do you have a student that's in district with loads of services that would be over $90,000. The IDEA certified, the IDEA is just a grant. It's an individual with disability grant. We apply that, some of that to set certified salary. We have it to, for preschool and a special ed teacher. We have a classified staff would be a paraprofessional. There's an offset there. We have some money in for purchase service offset, and you can see there was some money in for SR2. It's not there anymore because it's dried up and we didn't continue those things on. You can see that last year's budget had $150,000 offset for a special education outplacement. We can't do that this year because we're not gonna have the funds. We're spending them all in the current budget we're in. You can see the program increase. It's over 17%. I've never experienced anything like this with a number of outplacements. This is the most volatile program that we have. But it's legal and we do a good job of moving students in and out of special education and providing services. But it's the outplacement cost that is the piece that's really driving the increase. Transportation is pretty quick. Again, a portion of secretaries, including my assistant, is the staffing there. So there's a secretary at hall, secretary at center. Part of their job is transportation. So that's where you see the 0.35. We put a dollar amount to that. The bus contract has a slight increase over the current year. We found that the musical events, we were actually using needed more money because of where they were going. So we increased that dollar amount, but sporting events was using less. So again, like we look at this and want to make sure we're pulling back dollars where we don't need them. The other piece that's on here is the diesel's part of this. We have a higher or a lower price for diesel. So you see the savings that comes into that. So this program is, it's a little over 2% increase, which is actually pretty decent for transportation. Because some contracts, which is the big driver of this program, some contracts right now are in the 5, 6, 7% range per year going up. We're in the midst of a 5-year contract.
Can I just ask, Phil?
Yes.
A lot of times when you've got a deal like that, the town benefits too. Is that the case on diesel?
So Donna gets a report, and we just kind of monitor it, and I'm like, hey, do you have any updated reports? We work with it's a broker, I'm assuming, or is it a direct company? And so when they just give us what the daily rate is, and so we watch it, and sometimes it's like you're gambling, you're like, oh, it's up 10%, but they just keep saying it's gonna keep going up and up and up, and we'll lock in. Once you lock in, you can't change. This year, when it dropped below the current budget rate that we're in, fuel is so volatile. We were below and we're like, hey, we're gonna save some money. We do that with the town, and so it's the same price for diesel and heating fuel that we pay for everything for the town.
Thanks.
We negotiate together. Health services is basically the nurse's office. So we have a nurse in each building. Obviously through all the COVID madness and all the things that they have to deal with for reporting, they've been outstanding. We're required to have a medical advisor, another unfunded mandate. We do that. Obviously, there's sub rates in there, substitute nurses. We've looked at what we've used in the past couple of years. There was a slight increase there. We left their supplies alone. for the amount. But you can see that overall, there's just a slight increase of over 2% in that program, for our 2 nurses at both buildings. Program 6 is curriculum and staff development. This is all of the training for all the curriculum, everything that we're required to do for teachers and bringing in programs. There's also some contractual things in here that are around, team leader stipends. That's part of the contract. Outside conferences, we're required to pay so much money for conferences. Again, I tell you, like, needs-based budget, we watch and have watched for many years the amount of money that people use for conferences. And they get a certain dollar amount in their contract. I think it's $400 off the top of my head. 400 times 50 is 20,000. We only budget 10 because we look at use. Some people just don't use it because they get enough professional development in-house for what we provide. So we have kept it at 10 for a reason. And you can see that first year when we went from 22 and 23 and brought it down. That's the reason why we do those things. We constantly look at those things. The other thing in here is it's all professional development related, but you can see the drop in the teacher workshops in-house. We've done a lot of professional development. We used a lot of COVID funds for professional development. So we felt comfortable bringing that number down because of what we've done in the last 3 years in particular. This program has an 11%, over 11% decrease, which is kind of unheard of, but this is where, for us, the COVID funds, it's like, again, one-time purchases, right? It's not gonna come back to you. We have all of our staff trained in reading programs, all of our staff trained in certain, like second step, our social emotional curriculum. They're all trained in those things. We've paid for those. Program 7 utilities is pretty straightforward. Again, contracted rate. We looked at what we were actually using for these programs, and we just take that average. You can see that, again, the water rates are a little bit different by building. Because one's through Connecticut Water and the other one's through Whitewater. Or Whitewater, it's like their service for us. So, but you're just paying for your usage. Electricity, obviously paying for your usage. And the rates are there. Utilities is slightly under a 3% increase, again, reasonable. Program 8, this is again one where you're gonna see a big change. So with all the conversation and the vote not to build a new school, I think the Board of Ed is left with trying to determine what that vote meant, because it didn't mean, the only thing it meant that we know it meant was they didn't want a new school. And so the Board of Ed really has a drive here to make sure we fix the buildings. And there are a lot of projects. I think we presented 80 projects, something like that.
Close to that,
60,
yeah.
80, I don't remember the number, projects to CIP. There are a lot. And to manage all the projects that need to be done, the board really thought it was critical to put a facilities director in here. This is something that I will tell you eats up a ton of my time. I feel like that's what I do right now. It'd be nice to try and focus some time on actual academics and learning. But when you start talking about huge HVAC projects and writing grants and overseeing all of these projects, roof projects, both buildings, they felt it really important to have this in the budget. So we put a salary and benefits in here into this budget. It's new. And the discussion that was had around this was that this is not a forever position. If you all, good luck, have, and CIP has the ability over the next 5 years to get all of these projects that everyone's asking for on track, we get into a position where there's not all of these major items each year. And it comes down to smaller items. I say smaller items, a boiler, that can be managed by me. Whatever it is, right? An oil tank, I've done those things. But when you have numerous heavy duty projects that are meetings with the state because they're grant funded, that is a significant amount of time. So I think Arthur Christensen said, you know, this is that 5 to 7 years, if we can get all those projects checked off, and then we go to smaller amounts. This position is not intended to be in a union. And it would be very, very clear if this person is hired to say that you are on your own contract. With the expectation that get this done in 5 to 7 years, the same drive that we did with our curriculum director. You have 3 years, what can you get done? And so they have that amount in here. So when you see the big increase in salary, that's really what it is. A going rate for a facilities director is 80 plus. Some facilities directors are 120. This is not a fix-it person. We have had a maintenance director in the past. This person is developing and helping develop the CIP plan, making sure all the projects are being followed through on. By talking to contractors and reviewing bids, writing RFPs, holding interviews for contractors. That's what this job is. And there's for sure plenty to do around those things for this position.
Do you think that's realistic, $80,000 for that? In my experience, that pays considerably more than that for.
I don't think you're gonna get a seasoned person, Walter. I think you're gonna get someone that might be trying to get their foot in the door, and do the work.
When I look at the project manage too, this is, yeah, that's a six-figure job at most.
It is, and some of this would be, like, I'm the only person that can submit grants. They can't even fill it out, they're not allowed to. So I would still have a role, it just would be the constant management of these things. When we looked at the facilities director openings in like Indeed and in the state, it was in the 80 to 100 range on smaller scale items. You get project managers that are on big things, they're 150 plus. I guess the only way you find out is you put something out there.
Would it make any sense to have this job like for all the town buildings rather than just the schools?
So we sent a communication to the selectman's office and they don't have anything in their budget. I think the board feels like there's enough work in just the board side to do something. You could consider making this, and I think the board would be willing to do that. Like if we could get a facilities director that is full town, full scope. It's something that I think they would consider, but they felt like they needed to put something in here for a dollar amount. And I have not heard back of whether or not they have anything in dollar amount for the selectmen side. I don't believe they do. I don't think there was interest enough yet. Whereas we're ready to go. The board is ready to go on this and we need to make sure to get some of these projects done. Some of these are very time sensitive. And that's the conversation at CIP, particularly the HVAC grant. The HVAC grant is the next one. I've heard rumor that it might be open up in summertime as the next round and potentially December as well. That grant dries up and it's not supposed to be there anymore. Well, when you have a $2 million, $3 million, $4 million project and you're getting 63% back, that's huge money.
Well, that's with the energy savings, right, from the utilities and so forth.
It's all of it's heating, cooling, ventilation, any of those things. If there's a roofing project, this person would help all those things. That's a possibility, but the board felt strongly, they know adding this in it's over 1%, right? This is 1%, because when you add in benefits, it's over 1%. But they know how critical this is right now. And one thing that we feel like we heard was from the public to say, fix it, let's get the right person in there to make sure. And the board said the other night to me, no offense, Bill, it's not your expertise. It's not. I didn't go to school to be a facilities director. My degree is in ed leadership. I have learned a ton about it. And you jokingly said I could put it on my resume, and I can. But I still don't have the expertise around those things. We still have to hire those people, and this person would fill that role. And I do think this building needs it. I think the library needs it, and the town hall needs it. So it's something I think the board would consider, but we have dollar amounts and a dollar tied to it.
No, I'm just thanking them for the commentary.
Yeah, that was. I was just wondering what you just said about, expertise is. It's sort of, it's hard to get your head around, but I'm thinking. Older buildings like 70-year-old, 100-year-old buildings actually require a higher level of expertise. Is that something that, back to Walt's question, is that something that makes that a harder hiring?
I don't think
Marker
so.
to hit?
I don't think so, and the reason I'll tell you why,
Yeah.
is this person is still gonna be a generalist. So their general overview of all of these projects is way more than mine. Right? I have enough to be dangerous when I read up forever on roof projects, and I know enough about roof drains now to be a little dangerous. This person's gonna be a generalist. It does not mean though, and it's in CIP, right? So you see in the CIP budget for HVAC that you need an owner's project manager for that project. This person is gonna manage all of those things together and be able to go in and look at a contract and look at a proposal and say, there's no way they can do that. They can call and talk to vendors and say, get additional feedback, ask questions, but they're generalists. You're still gonna need some of those expertise for certain projects. And that's where, they would be the point contact.
And then you could focus more attention on the tap dance and figuring out where the kids are during all these phases.
Correct. The insurance piece that's there, that's Kerma, that's property insurance, but it's also our cyber insurance. I think, I'm knock on wood, I think we're actually gonna have cyber insurance very soon. We've worked really hard with Novus to get this, cyber insurance is part of this program. And we had budgeted, I think 15,000 this year, and we're in just over 6,000. It came in lower than we expected. So we're using the funds from this year to help offset the special ed costs that we have, the freeze. And we were able to bring down this budgetary number for Kerma, for it's not a ton, but it's another $7,000 to $8,000 that comes in there for savings. We did not bring custodial supplies up a ton, we did bring it up some. You can see the increase in this program is 24%. It's the position, right? It's the facilities director position. Program 9 is kind of a catch-all, system-wide support. It is, I'm part of that catch-all, my assistant's part of the catch-all. We put the sub-caller in here as well because they do the substitute calling for the district. We put them in here. So you can see that we have our contract rates in here. And then the purchase services where when I came here, one thing that we had a really hard time with was, someone would say, well, I need $2,000 for this subscription. I need $4,000 for this subscription. We have it down to a science now, and Donna can attest to that. This is what we need for the thing to run the district. So whether it's legal fees, copiers, IT, our school messengers, how we send out notifications, our Power School hosting, all of our assessment stuff, any of our district-wide subscriptions like that are academically based are in here. We have a security screener. So when someone comes in and they have their ID scanned, that's our Raptor system. All of these items that are here, we now have gotten them to exactly what the dollar figure we need. And again, we go back and we go, do we have a need for this? If you look at the district-wide subscriptions, we went from 9,500 to 5,800. There's a reason why. We identified a program we were no longer using, no longer needed, and you don't need that number at 9,000, you bring it down. So again, the needs-based thing, security-wise, I know this is silly, Amazon Prime is a new item on there. We found out that we were sharing one Amazon Prime account across the district and everybody had the password for it. Not good protocol. So now everybody has their own password and it's secure, and if something happens, we can go figure out where it came from. Simple things. The supplies are minor, what we have in there. And then the dues are for myself, the Board of Education, for Donna's office. We have some conference money in there for Board of Ed, some conference money for me, which quite frankly it's minimal. I don't ask for a lot, I don't travel a lot. I don't get any trips with my family to Hawaii. That's not what I do. There are some superintendents that do that, just so you know that. So the budget total in here is under a 3% increase, which when you consider that you have Novus in this, is pretty good. And again, Novus is shared with the town. And the last program is fringe benefits in subs. So, we looked at our usage for substitutes. We did not use all of those funds, and so we brought it down to 40,000. We do have a fund in there for long-term substitutes. Every single year, someone has to be out for a period of time, and we have to pay, when it's over 40 days, we have to pay an individual bachelor's pay. So instead of paying someone $135 a day, we have to pay them $260 a day. That's budgeted in here, so if a staff member has to be out, we have that. You can see the medical insurance is down even with the addition of the position. So this has that in there. So I said it was a 5% decrease, but remember, it's off of our current census and it's added in that staff support specialist and the facilities director. Okay. Dental was pretty much flat, but that's off of our census. Life insurance was flat. We have to have unemployment in there. We felt comfortable with the number. The workers' comp, we felt comfortable with the number. The Social Security Medicare is calculated based upon the amount of money, your total amount of money your staff is making. It's a percentage. So it's just something you have to pay. So there's a, $23,000 increase right there. That's 0.25% for us. Those types of things are big in a smaller, and I say smaller district, $9 million budget. It's still a lot of money, but we penny pinch because we want to maximize every dollar we can get. So again, you can see that we used COVID grants, ESSER 2, ARP ESSER. Those are no longer in there. So this program has a 1.68% increase in the overall program. The other items that are in this document, I'll let you read on your own. There's an instructional summary for center school. There's an instructional summary for hall school. There's a program for special education here for the instructional summary, and they also have definitions in here. Again, highly legal, all of those things that we have to provide. It's there for you for information. The other items are the explanation of the grants. This is something that I added. I thought it was important for you all to know, like, we write grants, they have to be used a certain way. And this is what each of those grants is and how much we applied in funds. So you can see that and what we applied last year. That's all there for you. The staffing list, I think, is important for you to see. So you know what we're doing. We add in people on our staff that are, and it's really after, it's in the other. Food services is a separate program. They're not in this budget. They're self-sufficient, but you need food services to run a school. So we consider them part of our staff. The business office is entirely paid for out of the selectmen's budget. But you need a business office to run a school district. I include them in our staff numbers. IT, we put one because it's one person in district per day that's shared with the town. That is, we consider them part of our staff, even though it's contracted. I think the important information, and I always brag about this, is that, like, you look for how you can get the most for the smallest amount of money. Our IT contract, what we spend on our IT contract, other districts have 8 or 9 employees because you have to have someone that's an expert in Wi-Fi. You have to have someone that's on servers and someone that's in security. We pay a contract, a shared contract for about, I think it's around $250,000 a year for Novus for an army. We have, that would be like 3 people for us, and you would never get the expertise that we have with that army. So when we have an issue, they're there to have our back, and it's very helpful. And then obviously transportation, they're a contractor. We hire M&J Bus Company, but we consider them part of our staff because you can't run a district unless you have everybody walk, and that's not Willington. Might be other more suburban or urban towns, but it's not Willington. You can see our CIP request, the highlights are the yellow, that's in there for you. And then this is the last slide. Again, transparency has always been, one thing that was driven into me was the more transparent I am about our budget and our numbers and what we need, the easier I find it to justify when I say we need something. There are people that, and I'm not gonna say who, but there are prior superintendents that spent lots of money in the ends of budget years, not in recent time. But never said a word about it. It was just quietly done and it was like a shopping trip. That's not me and that's not the board. When we spend money at the end of the year, when we have money at the end of the year, I already have a list. I have a list for this year that if we had $5,000, I know what I'm gonna purchase. We've already had conversations about it with teachers and administrators. So we keep that end of the year list so that we can try and use every dollar that we get. We still return money. And we do that intentionally to show that we're not just gonna blow through everything. And then you've done the board, I would say, a good favor, and it's been good business practice to put these funds back into the non-lapsing fund. This year is a prime example of that. If you had not done that, I'm telling you right now, the board would be asking you for $500,000 this year. Because that's our shortfall in special education this year. It's $500,000.
How much was in there at the start of this fiscal year?
I can't, it'd be whatever's on the program 3. Oh, you're talking about non-lapsing?
Yeah, not much.
So it was about 260 once you put in the remainder of the balance. And when we had the 260,000 in there, when we had the chimney issue, the board voted to pay for the chimney issue. But we can't do the work until the summer. So what I'm really kind of holding off on right now is the chimney's not leaking. I'm hoping it stays that way, because what we'll do is we'll use the $1 million that's in CIP, pay for the chimney, and then every dollar that's in non-lapsing will be an offset. So we're covering our special ed costs today, like the board just transferred $50,000 because out of health insurance, program 10 this year, because we had a savings. $50,000 is going into special ed to bring that number down. I had some money in the ARP ESSER account under salaries that was not gonna be used. We transferred $45,000 into salaries. So we've now, I'm hoping next budget or next board meeting, I can say, I'm gonna unfreeze the budget. I can't guarantee that, but we've knocked off 95,000. We're also waiting for our excess cost payment, which should be within the next few days. We'll know what our first payment looks like and guarantee what percentage we're actually gonna get. So we'll see, but without those non-lapsing funds, we would have come back to the board. And that's always been around special education outplacements. I think the agreement has been, you don't put a placeholder in, we don't put a placeholder in the budget in case we have an outplacement. We put exactly what we need, knowing that we would come back if that were the case, or we would use our non-lapsing funds. So, again, we know it's a big increase. We know that. But this is, my biggest thing I can say is this is a needs-based budget. There's nothing in here, where if we were gonna cut something where we can easily pull it from, it would be, some very challenging decisions. And when you start talking about cutting big numbers, it's not supplies, it's people. They would be eliminating positions. So, that's the presentation. I'm not sure if you have any questions about, I talked a million miles an hour about any specific programs, or anything else I can answer.
Just that last thing about the 50,000
Yeah.
transfer, was that over and above the 5% insurance savings? Or a part of that
Different, so no, because that insurance savings is July
going
1.
forward? Okay,
Correct.
Gotcha.
So we, I think I drive Donna a little bit nuts, because I'm always, and especially now in a shortfall year, I'm always saying, when we have staff turnover, every time there's staff turnover, so I'm gonna give you an example. I'm employee 1, I am making $65,000, and I am taking family benefits, which is like $28,000, okay? She's employee B, she's making 90,000, but she's waiving insurance. So she gets a waiver payment of like $1,600. We don't pay a dime for her insurance, right? We both leave. New person comes in that's making $90,000 and takes family benefits. That went from $91,600 to now like 125. If I leave and I hire someone that's at 90 and they're taking family benefits, it's a constant moving things around. So we budget based upon our current staff today, and we work within that number. It just happens to be that this summer, when we hired people, we had people waive benefits. And when that happens, there's savings. We've now applied that savings, and we might have more than $50,000. We're hoping and crossing our fingers, because if we do, we'll apply more of that to special ed to get us out of the hole. But they already transferred $50,000 in the current budget.
And then next year we would, with this budget and with that many, four kids there, it would be, non-lapsing would be down to zip in the next year.
They have no buffer next year.
Okay.
And that's why they put the $10,000 extra in each maintenance program in each school, because we're not gonna have if we have any money in our non-lapsing account, it's gonna be pretty much a miracle. I'll be honest with you, like you don't cover a $500,000 shortfall without some real creative stuff, and that's what we've been trying to do. And without a freeze. So. If I didn't spend another dollar out of the budget right now, the budget, if you look at our last budget report, it was, I think, around $250,000 in the hole, negative. That would be the non-lapsing account, and we'd be at zero for the, but that means we don't spend another dollar on anything the rest of the year. That's not possible,
Yeah,
so.
So, I've been looking at, your number of students in the schools over the years, and they've continued to drop.
Yeah.
Since the beginning of COVID, both schools have lost 21 students at each school. But your staffing seems, as far as teachers go, to stay constant.
Good question.
And you're not getting rid of teachers through attrition or anything, especially when you're losing students.
Yeah, good question. So this is the thing that's challenging about a small district, is that when you have 36 kids in this district, people will look at that as they'll say that it's small classrooms, they want small classrooms. And if you've ever seen people come out in public for class size, you want to fill a room, start talking about class size in this district, they just come out of the woodwork, and it's something they value. Our wiggle room is so small, so we could add, if we added 8 kids in one grade, we wouldn't have to add a teacher. So we look at the numbers, and that's the problem. Is so if you had, like I worked in Tallinn for a period of time as assistant principal, we had 10 sections, meaning 10 fifth grade homerooms. Well, if you had 15 kids leave across the entire grade, you would just eliminate a teacher. We don't have that ability because we would have a class of 30. We just can't do that. So that's where each year when we budget, we're budgeting based upon what we know. That's at the elementary school. The middle school is done on a middle school model, meaning they rotate classes, which is what the state really would like you to see. And so there's a math teacher, there's an ELA teacher. Where we have saved money is we share a science and social studies teacher. So there's a social studies teacher who does 5, 6, and a science teacher who does 5th and 6th. And same thing for 7th and 8th. We've been creative in doing those things. But it's really hard. This is what's strange. We could add 100 kids in this district and not add another teacher.
Well, I think you said in your second workshop that you could add 200 students.
It probably could be. Yeah, across if it was evenly distributed, yes, 100%.
But you wouldn't have to increase your.
But
staff.
wouldn't have to increase staff, because you're looking at, we'll call it 10 grades, including pre-K. Right, and so if you added, pre-K might be a bad example, but every other grade level, if you added 15 students, you would just filter them into those classrooms.
But you still have a higher number of students than what you actually desire.
You might, correct.
So,
Yeah.
as far as having 30 students in a classroom, I mean, is that really necessary? I mean, there's some things you do, especially in the curriculum, that could be considered non-traditional. So how about a non-traditional approach to your classes as far as where you're blending grades?
So we haven't had that conversation about blending grades because of the numbers. So when we have, although it's one thing we're looking at right now because of kindergarten, coming in, with the change to the state. But with like a union where you only have 8 kids in kindergarten and first grade, you would blend those together. But when we have 36, it doesn't make sense to blend those together. And that's like where you have that magic, when you hit that magic number, when I start looking at, 2 sections to 3, it's typically when I start looking at the elementary level, when I start talking about, 38 kids. You start with no paras, there's no additional support in those classrooms where they're not tied to special education. You start talking about an elementary classroom with 19 kids. You're gonna see parents start to come out and ask questions and want smaller class sizes. So when I hit that number, 38, 40, we start looking at that 3rd section.
All right, and then, so I watched the workshops and I watched up to the 3rd one. And by the end of the 3rd one, I was really encouraged because you were talking about having your increase at around 5%. You were hoping to be able to get it slightly under 5%, which would have been great too.
Yeah.
Because I mean, what would have been optimum was if it was around 4.5%. And then your Board of Ed decided, besides what you had wanted to do, to throw some more things into it, which really brought that figure up, which I find really discouraging.
So one of the things that's hard is, so as a superintendent, I feel like I have to bring balance, and I've been asked every year, like, hey, what do you not have in this budget that you would need? And so I don't know how long I would have a job for if I presented a 6% budget every year. Peter would be in the crowd throwing things at me, I'll be honest with you. Which is probably right. So when we worked through the workshop, we were under 5 because the insurance piece that came in during the workshops, that $50,000 happened during the workshops. And we were down to a 436, I think is the number. However, they still had some really big things to talk about. And it just happened that one of the members couldn't be at one of the workshops. And that last workshop was needed to discuss some heavy things. It was around special education. It was around, the facilities director, and it was around, the staff support specialist, that extra position. And looking at the staff support specialist, that addition, it's probably with family benefits, I think we were around $50,000 was something that was put in. We could spend just as much money on subs. And we would have that person every single day. It's a guarantee. I think that's why they found value in it. They went round and round about special ed and looking at best usage of how to do that. I think they came up with a good solution. And then the facilities director, I think they'd be willing to share if that were an option, which would bring their budget down. But those are the dollars, that's where the Board of Ed, that's their driver, they get to put those things in. And quite frankly, it's their job, they have to come up with what they see as the most critical things to put into their budget. And it came up, for sure.
Yeah, no, as far as where you were and where they decided to start adding things, I mean, without the addition of the things that they brought into the picture, are you still able to function the school the way that you wanted it to function?
So I think Arthur Christensen said this very well, and I always say, like, we're gonna make do with what we have. We're making do with our budget freeze right now, and it's not easy, but we're making do with what we can. And he said, I don't want you to make do, I want you to do it. Like, I want you to educate our kids as best we can, but it's within reason. I think the number of the facilities manager in this district, or facilities director, is, and sorry to CIP, but that's what they need. They need someone that's gonna tell them all of the projects, the order, how to lay them out over years. Someone that can sit with Donna. This town needs that position. And the Board of Ed is just the one that's willing to step up and put it in their budget right now to say, this is critical. Someone that can sit down with Donna and go, hey, how are we gonna lay out the next 10 years funding wise? Let's talk about what that's gonna look like. That person would have that role. And it's important. And so again, going back to just what the need is, I see those things as a need too. But I think I might get, you know, I didn't think I could put those things in, and put a budget out in front of the board without, getting some real negative feedback, to be blunt. But there are things in this budget that would benefit the town.
Could you, just point out to me where that new the special ed teacher is?
So if you look at the number of special ed teachers, it
Mhm.
shows as 0.4. I think is it 9.4?
Yeah,
So one of the things that, it was, again, I don't wanna speak to which board member it was, but it's important to hear the reason why. Arthur Christensen brought up the special ed teacher. And the reason why is Arthur subbed in our buildings back before becoming a board member. And when you sub in buildings, you get a different sense than you would as a parent. And you get to see kind of the inner workings of things, and he saw the amount of work that happens in special education. And oftentimes, those are the people that don't eat lunch, because they're running from item to item.
mhm.
And even when we schedule a lunchtime for them, they will grab their food and go. And so we try and put together a budget that we believe is gonna be palatable. And it's gonna be something that we think is gonna pass and still meet student needs. And so they asked me specifically about, well, are there any other things, if it's not gonna be a 1.0, which was the original request, and a 1.0 is $100,000, all right? That's with salary and benefits. My response was, we talk about several things to keep students in districts. One is having BCBA hours. We already increased that.
Okay.
We're also looking, and again, talking about sharing and stretching our dollars. We increased that dollar amount, Steph. However, we're still working with other districts locally to see if we can hire between the two of us a full-time BCBA that we would share. We would get more hours than we do through that, which is contracted. It's expensive.
Mhm.
So we're looking at those options. The other part of that, in the special ed request piece of it, and not going to a 1.0, was around reading and getting an expert. I hate to say this, is always about being sued and about providing the best education you can. There are certain programs that, when you are presenting for a case or presenting what you provide your students, there are certain academic programs that have high value. One of them is called Wilson. You could go to a 3-day Wilson workshop and say, I'm Wilson, you know, I teach Wilson now. You're not an expertise. You don't have expertise. You have 18 hours of training. A Wilson certified person has 100 hours of evaluate, meaning someone's watching you teach it and they've evaluated you, and you get your Wilson certificate, and you continue your ongoing professional development. That is a dire need for teaching students who have dyslexia. We have that need. It's something that we've talked about and tried to determine how we put it in the budget without adding loads of hours. And what we did was we said, can we get someone that's 2 days a week or 0.4, that worth of hours for that amount of money? I have someone who happens to be retiring, who has that training. I don't even know if they'd be willing to do it. And what you asked me before about the facilities manager or the facilities director's salary. If that person doesn't want to do it, I don't think I'll find something for $35,000. I don't know that. I might get somebody fresh out of doing some training, but that's where we landed on that. They settled at that 0.4 versus 1.0. And then when you're at 0.4, you're not offered benefits. So I guess 0.5 is the number. So you're only paying the salary portion of it, so there's 35,000, that was what was put in for that 0.4 for this, specifically for dyslexia, for special education services. That has been a need, and Marcia and I have not put that in there. That was something that we talk about, like, how do we get this? And part of that person's job would be to train our other staff members on how to implement that program. And you build capacity doing that. So that way, if that person does truly retire or the person leaves, you have other people that can do it. And that's what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, speaking of, are you seeing, and going forward, are you seeing a sort of a catching up that sort of may hit the special ed arena quite heavily after COVID? You know, like in terms of what kids have gone through developmentally and being caged in a way, you know, instead of,
So we watch our percentage all the time because we have to report to the state, and we also have students that go in to see if they qualify for special education and they don't. Our numbers are, I would say, very, very accurate. We have some students that leave each year. We see, again, mandate years ago, intervention plan, great, we have this great plan to roll out for you, make sure this plan happens. We're seeing more kids qualify for special education because of the rollout that they did for intervention. And you're set on a timeline that doesn't always make sense. You just might not be ready to learn that yet, but we have to keep providing services. And when the timeline's up, you didn't meet your goal, this is what you qualify for special education. It doesn't work, you know, but I don't know, special education it's a unique thing that you have to provide services, and you have to have the right people, and you have to have broad people. So you hope you have a special ed teacher who has a behavioral background, which we do. You hope you have somebody with a literacy background, which we currently do, and would continue with that.
thank you.
I would say, Steph, if I may, that there, in some districts, there are an increase in students who require, exceptional interventions, more so than have been seen in the past. What you were alluding to about children being stuck at home, those little toddlers did not go to the grocery store with their families and interact with other people and other things. And those little ones who were like 1 and 2 at the time are now in kindergarten. And it's a whole new experience for them to be in a room with a lot of other children and trying to work as their own like little culture in society and still learning things that are very demanding. Kindergarten isn't what it used to be. It can be a lot of play-based, but there are also a lot of expectations for reading and writing and in-depth math concepts. So because of those demands and because of what the children have all been through our COVID break, there are more kids that are ending up in intervention. And of course, our teachers and staff are doing what they need to do to touch all children and help catch them up where they need it and help extend where they need to also. But sometimes you do need those interventionist helps. And like Phil said, sometimes you go through those processes and then they end up being referred to special education because they aren't catching up fast enough through those other interventions like that. So if you've got a higher population of kids getting intervention, you're of course probably gonna end up with a higher amount going to be referred to special education. And there are rules and laws about how many, like the student finds, so checking to see how many students, like you really have to prove that they qualify for special education needs. And if they don't, then you have to go back to like your intervention plans and find other ways to suit them.
And that's why, like I talked about the special ed audit we did a few years ago, it was about pairs, but it was also about our identification process and to find out if we were over identifying, because if we were, you let go of teacher, right? You figure out that and you remove a teacher. We've actually removed pairs. So in our process, we said, we have too many pairs. And we've changed our scheduling around to make sure we're using the correct number of pairs, and we were not over identifying. So that was good to know, and when we don't over identify, it's just the staffing you need to service the number of kids we have.
And even this past Tuesday night, we did ask Marcia McGinley, the special education director, if she had use for another additional staff member just for her, the special ed department. And she declined, saying that she couldn't justify it. But, she was very interested in this, additional person to help with the reading, because that's, some place where she can really, especially with the, Wilson expertise. And that helps loosen the load a little bit of the other paraprofessionals. They can do, help other children or do other things during that time to help prepare for whatever the child needs next, for example. And it gives, the Wilson program's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
It's tried and true and proven to be very effective, especially with students with special education needs. So when we mentioned that to her, she jumped on it right away and said, yes, please, that would be so wonderful. And so especially, like I said, we have all those children, like more being sent to intervention and then get shifted over to special education. Well, some of them come from reading. And some of it is dyslexia, some of it is other reading disabilities, but having a person there, that's the special ed person that was added in here as one of our 4 things we discussed on Tuesday night. That's why that's there.
Could I just ask you to identify yourself for the sake of the,
Sure, hi, I'm Brianna Ross, I'm the Board of Education Chair.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thanks, Bree.
Yep. And then you were asking, sir, if I may, can we function without these 4 things? I hope that in our meetings you have seen and heard, and you know this gentleman enough to know that, we're making the best with what we have, but this is bare bones. Our public is asking for higher test scores. Our public is worried about the mental health of our students. And we're doing the best we can with what we have. And like Arthur had stated, we all agree, like that's not good enough. There's a lot more we would add to this to help all of our children if we could. And we had to be very particular about the things that we asked in addition, besides what is totally 100% necessary. I've been teaching for 22 years. I've seen a lot of budgets come around and have looked at them very specifically. There's not fluffing here. I wish we could. And so regarding those other pieces, the support specialist, Phil's had a lot of really great success with the one that we have had on board. It is nearly impossible to find substitutes. It's really difficult, even after making a pay raise for those positions and trying to be more competitive with the towns around us. It's just really, really difficult. And what ends up happening is you have your substitute coordinator, Brianna, you were saying, as an example. So someone from our office has to spend a large chunk of their morning trying to figure out how to cover one classroom and say Mrs. Jones is absent. I have seen those classrooms before where the children have not their teacher. That's hard for some of them enough. But then they have Mr. A for 20 minutes. They have Mr. B, the PE teacher is now in their classroom for 45 minutes. And then someone else and someone, it's very disruptive to their day. And that can have a long time impact when it's happening to them all the time. Not to mention that our paraprofessionals and staff get really burnt out. If they expect to come to school and do a certain position and then are constantly being told at 8:30 in the morning, they need to go here at 1:30 to cover a meeting. Oh, by the way, don't forget 10 o'clock, you need to be down in preschool. That's really asking them for far more than their job description required of them. So when you have the support specialist on here, I've seen it, I know how important that is, and that's why I stood behind that. That's why our board stood behind the support specialist. The maintenance repair funds, I think Phil explained it very well. We're gonna have nothing. And we have a 100-year-old building and the other one's not so much younger either. Things are literally falling down. The ceiling at Hall Memorial School is actually falling down. There is plaster on the desk of the person who works there every single day. Our chimney is actually falling down and you could see that inside a student's classroom. Please, can we show them some more respect? Please, can we show these children that we care for them? And so we're going to take care of their buildings, their education, their character, their community. It's really important. And the facilities manager, I was on the school building committee and we spent years studying the current state of those 2 school buildings. And in the end, the committee recommended building new because that seemed like a wiser financial decision and just one that made more sense to a lot of us. In the end, of course, we all know how that went at the referendum. And so from that, place in our town, that decision. The only thing left to do would be to take care of the buildings we have now, and you cannot do that on your own.
I think we're all in agreement that the
Yeah.
buildings need to be taken care of, it's just going through the way to do it. And, I did find that in your meetings and whatnot, that you feel like the CIP and the Board of Finance is somewhat of a hindrance. And you're moving forward as far as, getting the schools into the shape that they need to be in. It's not that we're so much the problem, it's like if you look at those 380+ mandates that you have to follow and spend money on, that's the problem right there. So, my feeling, the feeling of a couple of other people was that the way that whole Board of Ed thing ended up unraveling, where he came up with his around 5% and you guys added more, it was almost like an activist type move, and if you want to take an activist type move, take it to Hartford, where they're the ones who are passing the mandates, and they're making it difficult for these communities to do what we have to do.
Well, I certainly hope that you didn't have any ill feelings towards the Board of Finance at any of the Board of Education meetings, because I don't remember what that may have sounded like, but it certainly was never an intention. I think we all had facilities manager in the back of our minds because of the vote failing. And so we went through what we already had, what was basic, what we've done for years and years and years, and then knew that that needed to be added. It was more, I think, of that type of mindset.
The challenge behind this budget too, Bruce, is that this is probably like a 3.5% budget without special ed.
Yeah.
And it just happens to be the year that special ed hit hard. Because in a year where if we didn't have that huge increase in special ed, you'd probably go, wow, 3.5, we're gonna get an extra staff support specialist, we're gonna get an extra, you're gonna get a facilities manager. You probably wouldn't blink because all those things. It's the balance of the two together that, is the challenge. So.
As far as the facilities director goes, I mean, all of the buildings in town need work to one degree or another.
Sure.
And I think would be appropriate in a different budget other than the education budget. But that's my opinion.
I personally feel it should be a town job, it's, you're not gonna find anybody for 83 grand, no way. I'd be amazed if you found somebody with any experience for that price.
I think
I deal with this stuff all the time, that's what I do for a living, and that's a pretty lightweight person if you can get them for that.
I think everybody's in agreement that it should be a town position. It's only in the education budget because they're the only ones that thought to put it in there. I think everybody, if they wanna, they just were the ones with the forethought that we need this position in town. We definitely need it for the schools. That's why it's in the education budget. It's not, they're not the only ones that need it. They just are the only ones that had the gumption to say they need it.
And it's gonna be in a dollar amount, no matter where it is. I mean, we could drop ours to 60 and the selectmen could add 60 and you now have the salary of 120, right? You could do those things. I think one thing Jim Marshall said that, hit me was that if you don't have it in there, you can't talk about it, right? It's something that people have talked about and maybe the education budget is not the right place for it. Maybe it should be a townwide position, but the Board of Ed can't control that. All they can control is their own budget. And they heard from me that not hearing it was in another budget, and not seeing it yet, or hearing a conversation about it was, I think, the reason they put it in theirs.
I have a question about that. If a school facilities position went forward and in the next budget year, the selectmen were ready to feel amped up enough that we should think of a town-wide position, would you be able to pivot at that point?
I think so. I mean, we share services all the time and we do it well.
I know that.
Public Works does stuff for us that, we don't have to hire somebody out to do. We do that really well. And it's intentional. And this is no different. We would share that service 100% through and through. Do I think that right now there's a greater need on the school side? There's some big projects that need to happen. And that's why it's important. But again, when CIP sits down, they're not just looking at Board of Ed, they're looking at everything. But the only thing that's probably in CIP that they wouldn't look at is the trucks. Right, that wouldn't be their job, but everything to do with that facility and that all the buildings we have in town, that could easily be blended together. And that would be manageable, I think, for me as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, I just wanted to say, that I do, 80,000 sounds a little light. And my concern would be if it's someone who's inexperienced, that we need someone who is gonna be able to stand up in front of the town and explain in a very clear way with some legitimacy what we need, because we'll just argue about what it is, if they don't have the experience, so,
To get it appropriated, you mean?
yeah.
It's not
to
big
get the plan
contract,
together.
to put the bids together, to do all the work, to walk the jobs with these people, to make sure, that. To do the bid scope so that it's consistent quoting and everything, so it's apples for apples, it's a lot of work, and it takes people to know what they're doing to do these
Right,
things.
and they have to convey that knowledge to all of us,
That's
we
right.
have to believe them.
So they gotta have some business acumen too, to come here and actually present it.
Well, to be fair, I think you guys were originally talking about 110, and you probably felt like you needed to,
It is
Right.
110.
it is
The
110.
110 is the salary and benefits.
Okay,
So we
and
pulled
so
full family
81 is the
benefits in,
salary.
no. But the benefits is in is the package,
Gotcha.
but again, the 80 was on the lower range of the salary, but we were still in the range. But it's on a very low rent,
Mhm.
agreed, I think the board would love to see, that be a shared position and drop some of that money, even if this, it's coming from the same pocket, right, the town's pocket. Even if the benefits stayed on the Board of Ed side and there was a shared salary. So part was on the selectmen's budget, part was on the Board of Ed, just like we do Novus. I think that the Board of Ed was 100% support that solution.
I mean, could come from the fire departments, part could come from the library.
Absolutely.
Part could come from the seniors, I mean, they all
Right.
need it.
I see it as the same pocket, but
Yeah, yeah,
yes, yeah.
Do you think we should ask if anyone, like Melissa on Zoom might want to ask a question?
Certainly. Melissa, did you have a question?
It was kind of answered because I was kind of thinking that was a little bit low too, as far as the experience wise. If we get somebody and we do end up doing that and then they don't really have the experience because we've, paid them very little, would that put us in a bad position as well? But no, I commend the Board of Education for at least bringing up the discussion.
Yeah, it's been discussed in CIP as well, right?
Yeah.
Nothing's in there.
Well,
Yeah, I
nothing's in
mean-
there, but it was discussed a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I think it's always, I mean, not always, for the past few years, we have talked about it, but it really, it needs to come out of an operating budget, so it has to be in one somewhere, yeah, CIP can't hire the person
Right.
and pay for the person, so.
The Board of Ed looked at a couple options too. They were looking at, shared service with another town. I think this town has enough right now. It makes some sense to have it here. The other option they were discussing, was looking at just like you do a retainer for an attorney, was doing like a block of hours.
You can have a consultant or somebody.
Right,
for you.
I just don't, they tend to charge you an arm and a leg for those consulting fees, and when they're up, you're done. Whereas if you have someone on salary, you have they're coming back the next day. So. You hope.
Yeah, look you in the face, yeah. Look you in the eye.
Do you have any more questions?
Thanks, Phil, that was really thorough.
Thanks a lot.
Good job with the presentation.
All right, so we'll move on now to correspondence. Do we have any correspondence?
Well, I had a question. So you emailed us, forwarded an email that you received from someone named Clark Griswold.
Yes.
Is that
I
a
just,
person?
it's a real person,
Yeah,
as
I think
far as I could see. I mean, we went back and forth. I sent him information and everything. All I did was, as you know, the chair of the board, I just wanted to share something that I got from somebody.
Right.
Supposedly from town, so that's what I did.
Okay, and so, but when you do that, you should also share your response, just so that we know. Because if you're in, we don't know how you answer the questions.
Okay.
But, and sometimes it helps to have, just direct the questions right back to whoever he's asking them from. But,
But are you thinking that, that it's needs to be more vetted, or?
no, it just struck me because it didn't seem like a real name. And
Didn't say cousin Eddie.
no,
I
and,
started laughing. I started laughing. Sorry.
but it could,
Well,
it could,
was it Clark W. Griswold?
no, but, you know, I have never heard of someone with that name and stuff, so it just stuck out to me.
Okay.
They didn't seem like they paid a lot of attention, though. I was
Yeah.
impressed with that.
Yes, they did.
Very thorough question.
All right, so move on now to present to speak. Public participation is desired and encouraged.
He's moving away from you.
Speakers will be limited to, it was humorous. Speakers will be limited to time and appropriateness of comments to maintain progress, stay on topic, and maintain the quorum. Do we have anybody more for present to speak? Mike?
Good evening. First, I'd like to say thank you to Phil and the Board of Education. Having sat across the table from these presentations for 5 years, I understand how complicated that budget is and how important it is for people to understand it, because it is the biggest department, the biggest ask in town. I think good work was done there, and the presentation was, as always, was done well. I'm sorry, I didn't identify myself. Mike McCoo, Clover Springs Drive. And also, with the permission of the fire chief and the fire department president from Willington Hill, a couple of comments. The fire departments, just some clarity on the comments that were made earlier in present to speak. The fire departments, and I'll speak for Willington Hill specifically, are completely open to public input, public oversight, and the comments that were made earlier hinting to things being done or wanting to be done without public input are frustrating to the fire department. The fire department members are dedicated to the town and they work mostly for free. And the fire department members process every single public dollar through the public budgeting process. This Board of Finance knows very well that every public dollar is seen through this process. And the same thing would happen with any CIP dollars. And the fire department also supports the idea that whatever committee ends up potentially being created, which still seems to be up in the air through the Board of Selectmen, would have public involvement on it. The fire department meetings also are open to the public for the portion where they deal with public money. The finance office in the town office building pays the fire department's bills with the public money. It is completely above board and completely available to the public, and the fire department has been that way for decades. The fire department is completely in support of doing that and does not want any aspersions cast that they're spending public money without oversight. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Do we have anybody else? So now we'll move on to good and well. Oh, Peter, sorry.
Peter Wilkins, 97 Fast Road. I too appreciate the quality of the presentation tonight, and especially Bill's transparency, having been part of the process when that wasn't the case. That's very helpful to everyone. Two things jump out at me just listening tonight as probably the only person here as a townsperson. And that is our per pupil cost my arithmetic is good, it's $25,455 per student. And that's just sort of dividing the budget by the enrollment that was reported tonight, so I think I'm in the ballpark. The other number that jumps out at me is that of our 384 students, 80 students, as I heard correctly tonight, are enrolled in special education, which is, my math is reasonable, 21% of our student population, significantly higher than I recall from the past. I'm gonna opine that these two metrics have a lot to do with what Phil reported tonight about mandates. Our high per pupil costs, our high levels of special education probably have a lot to do with Hartford telling us how to run our school system, not how we would run our school system. That said, I also understand that we get a ton of educational cost sharing money from the same folks telling us what to do. I don't know that number, but I'm guessing it's around 4 million, 4.5 million, of our $9.5 million budget. So I guess that gives them the right to tell us what to do. I'm not really sure, I don't have Brianna or Phil's expertise in this area. What I'm wondering is there a tipping point at some point where the mandates, and how Hartford is telling us to run our schools outweighs what we would do? And we just say, keep your BCS money or revenue to us. We'll run our own school in Willington. That's kind of my question. Can we move forward in our own direction, doing what we do well? One of the things that occurs to me is Bill talking about it, and he did on the school building committee, which I was a part of, with the enrollment expert, how in small schools you can have anomalies of class size. So if Ashford has a really low number in one area, we have a really high number in another area, could we just say, no, we don't want to regionalize, we're not interested in that, but can we just share a resource? Can Ashford and Willington share a resource and fill in the blanks, if you will? But I'm guessing the state's saying, no, you can't do that, right? So can we just say goodbye to them, goodbye to the ECS revenue, and can we actually run our own schools more effectively with the tax dollars we raise? Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. All right, we have anybody else for public present to speak? Then we'll move on to good and welfare. I have one for good and welfare. We saw Karen Cody today, Human Services, she gave me this. They're having a fundraiser. It's a Saturday night comedy show on April 20th at the Rockville Elks Carriage House. It's $25 per person. It'll support and help raise funds for our Human Services Department. All right, anybody else for good and welfare?
I just wanted to share a brief status on CIP. To sort of recap what happened last night. So, because where we're at in the process is that we saw our first draft of we call it the big spreadsheet, that shows all of the different projects that's been requested, in which years, and Donna has attempted to put some funding sources to each of those projects, whether it's grants, local funds, or operating budget. It kind of lays it all out. And what we try to do is get to a number that that does not increase by drastically what the local spending amount is, the amount that we need to collect from the taxpayers to make it all work. And somewhat encouraging is that in the very first run of it, which we had a lot of discussion about whether or not it's correct, like how that we should be doing all these things in this order, which is a whole other thing. But the net of it is that we're in the ballpark where it is not a huge number more than we spent last year. We've been trying to do 10% more of what we've done the year before, because for years and years, we have drastically underfunded our capital plan. So I'd say over the last 10 years, we've been trying to make incremental increases to it. And we're now at a point where, it's okay, I guess. So what the biggest thing in it is the request from the Board of Ed, which, has in year one an ask for $1.5 million.
That mainly the roof.
Yeah, it's the roof.
It's roof and the HVAC.
And the HVAC and the
And
solar.
the solar.
And it's actually, they're gonna need a little bit more money than that, but they have the money from this current year. I'll say last year, but it's this year.
What's the priority on solar versus like a roof or? It should be
Well,
solid.
I think the priority is driven by the timing of when the grants are available and the deadline to get
And the money
the
drying
money.
up on the HVAC grants. for
Yeah.
Because those were COVID driven and we're still some left.
And there is some thinking that, and I am not an expert at this at all, but when you're up working on the roofs and taking things apart anyway, and you're putting things on it, there might be some savings because you're actually opening up things anyway. So it does make sense to do all that together. And it does look like we can make that funding work, in year one. So that's the good news. The bad news is that we pretty much argued over every single thing. So there's that.
I heard
But-
it's heated.
Yeah.
Wish we had a facilities manager now.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's part of it. I mean, the other big part of it is the fire departments who both have, the original request is for a joint project of building 2 fire stations for $11.5 million. And so we can argue about, is 11.5 the right number? Is the year we're putting it in the right year? Should we be building 2? How do we decide which one is most important? There's one that is not functional right now. Should we just decide to go do something with that? But then there's the overlay of, we need this committee to help figure out what we actually need built, where we need it built. And that, I think Pete is committed to making happen quickly. And we did put some funding into the plan so that that committee will have some money to do the studies and to make something happen quickly so everyone can move on and make a plan. So,
You want to talk about how it was redirected a little bit?
I don't know.
Well, it was the place, so the reason it was in the plan already is because it was catch-up design money for Willington Hill to catch up with where Willington 1 already was with their planning, because they started it years earlier. So that money was what seemed to make sense to come up with a more cohesive committee outlook, to what we do with both and what's the order of things.
Yeah.
Pete seemed to think that would work pretty well.
Yeah, so the result is, this is what's gonna happen next. Next week is the selectmen coming to this board with their budget, which they probably won't have an approved budget because they are not planning to meet before then, and they don't have an approved budget right now. So I guess they're gonna share a draft. A lot of the numbers in their budget are CIP numbers, or correspond to CIP projects. So that's where it gets a little bit, muddy. But I think on the surface of it, it's okay. Then, they're actually meeting again on Wednesday of next week. I won't be there, but they're gonna go ahead and have a meeting to try to at least lock in what the year one looks like in this plan. And, so that then when we hear it on Thursday, it will make a little more sense. So that's I don't know if that's good or if that's welfare, but that's that.
Yeah.
We'll see if we just went back to
It
correspondence.
didn't feel quite like that last night, but I'll go with it. Yeah, felt more like, what are you made of?
All right, do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good meeting.
Thank you.
I left at 8:30 last night.
Yeah, no, yeah, and you you stay until, you're like, I'm respecting the process.
3 nights in a row, I'm like.
Like that.
I
You
got
gotta-
the